Hello, we had an extended introduction today. That was great. Love the little
We had
jingle.
to play it once for all of us. Right? We had to play it 4 times.
Good point. Good point. So hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Realities podcast. I'm Tammy Nemeth. I'm one of the hosts. We have 4 amazing people on our Energy Realities podcast. And today we have Irina Slav in Bulgaria. Hi, Irina. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It's really hot outside because of climate change, but we're surviving somehow. Haven't roasted yet.
It's never been hot there before, has it?
No, never in July.
Yeah, we used to call that summer, but now we call it climate change.
Yeah.
And today we also have Mr. David Blackmon, who's in his bunker in Texas. So how are you today, David?
I am just lovely. It's a beautiful day, rainy day up here in North Texas. And man, we've had a lot of rain this year. It's awesome.
Yeah. And there's some flooding that happened, some flash floods, which is pretty terrible.
Yeah, we had way too much of it down around Kerrville, and it's such a tragedy. Just one of the worst things that's ever happened. I tell you, it's hard to even talk about it without tearing up. It's so awful.
Yeah, that's pretty tragic. And hopefully they'll be able to solve the situation and find the people, some that are missing. And today we've got also Stu Turley, who's at his truck somewhere in an undisclosed location.
No, actually in Shreveport, Louisiana. So the truck is my Starlink. So I'm very mobile today.
Wow, you probably have a better connection than I have with Starlink. Okay, so today we're talking about EU and China, and is it an alliance rising? Now, people may not know this, but it's the 50th anniversary of EU or European and Chinese relations, where it was formalized back in May 1975. And so this is one of these milestone years that the EU and everybody loves to talk about. And so what they've done is last week there was some meetings and they shook hands on some new kind of partnership. And it's interesting that we have a former Portuguese socialist leader in charge of the European Commission, and we have a former socialist Portuguese leader in charge of the UN. I'm not really sure what the implications are there, but the socialists seem to get around. And one of the things that we were talking about in the email chain leading up to this episode today was, will China's alliance with Russia affect its relations with the EU, which views Russia as a hostile nation? There seems to be a few conflicting takes on what the EU-China relationship should be. So last week we had Costa meeting with his counterpart from China saying all happy things about partnerships and they're going to work together on climate change. And then this morning there was a Financial Times article saying that EU wants a firm commitment for China to tangibly reduce emissions. And China said, yeah, we're doing lots already. I don't think we need to do any more. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then in a bizarre twist over the weekend, NATO head Mark Rutte, the former prime minister of the Netherlands, made this bizarre comment that the EU could be facing a Red Dawn scenario where China attacks Taiwan, but has Russia distract the EU by launching an invasion of a NATO or EU country. And the Russians replied and said maybe Ruta's on mushrooms or something, because that's a crazy idea. And for those who may not know, Red Dawn refers to the 1984 movie starring Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, one of my favorite movies, about a Soviet invasion of the USA, utilizing Cuban and communist South American troops. So it's interesting that he's taking that view. So with all that in mind, what do our panelists today think about EU and China? Is there an alliance rising? Are they just making commemoration sort of talk or noises because it's the 50th anniversary? Irina, I start with you.
Oh, of course you would, because I'm the closest. Thank you. This Rudder comment is really amusing. I hadn't seen it. It's just adorable. It would have been adorable if there weren't in politics these people who think that real life and real geopolitics is a Hollywood blockbuster movie. But apparently that's where we are. We have people running the show who think they live in a movie. Remember Kaya Kallas posing like a Bond girl or something with another guy like this?
Really?
Oh, so sweet. But I think the EU is realizing that if it really wants to go to net zero, it can't do it without China. I mean, various analysts have been saying it. You cannot do it on your own. You have to. There's no transition. What was it? Was it Wood Mackenzie or someone else, or probably McKinsey? I don't know. Who literally said there can be no energy transition without China, because it's got the cheap panels and the cheap turbines and cheap everything. And the reason it has all these cheap things is because its energy costs are low. We've talked about this so many times, it's embarrassing to even mention it. But what I find particularly frustrating is that the EU has been carrying with this rather belligerent talk that we're going to build our own supply chains, we're going to decouple from China, we're going to stop relying on them, to depend on them so heavily. And what are they doing now? They're talking about partnership, about cooperation. Can you get any more hypocritical than the EU right now?
Hypocritical or schizophrenic, because it's like one side is like, oh, we have to
bipolar,
yeah.
That's bipolar. Yeah, and as for Russia, well, clearly the EU is being run by people with the mental age of below 10. Well, Russia and China are run by people who are mentally adult. So they have their interests, they pursue their interests, both countries. I don't know the EU can really put a wedge between them. But in the end, it's the geopolitical, the economic interests of these countries that will influence their foreign policies. While in the EU, we have the kids. No, seriously, these are not serious people. I'm totally fed up with all of them. I need to see some adults in the room in Europe.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
I don't know who, like, I'm thinking of the various EU political leaders, and I can't think of any that act like adults.
I know.
It's really sad. So, David, I was thinking when we first talked about this topic, and it seemed to me like the EU was fully aligned with the United States under Biden and the progressives. And I was thinking of it in terms of a dance card, and now I'm thinking maybe they're looking for a new sugar daddy, given Ruta's comments at the NATO conference. But it's like when the progressives were there was this new global order. There was this bifurcation, and it was EU America and the West, and then there was China and the BRICS, and that there was this division happening. And now the EU is kind of like, America's gone off doing something. Can they be part of the BRICS? what's the EU to do? Are they just looking for someone who can help them do their military, or what? What's your take on this?
Yeah, they should be careful looking for a new sugar daddy, because Xi Jinping is more like a sugar grizzly, right? I mean, China. Well, of course, the United States is much as we like to talk about our friendly relations overseas. The United States is pretty aggressive too, and about protecting its own interests. When we have a real president in office. For the last 4 years, we had a fake president in office, and the administration was run by the same kind of emotional children that are running the EU. And so, yes, we were fully aligned on all the green stuff and the global climate alarm stuff, and we were in the process of beginning to deindustrialize our economy here in the U.S., just as is happening across much of the EU and in the UK. Unfortunately, it's really sad. But one of the ironic things is to watch how the same EU leaders who greet Donald Trump as a hero at NATO consider him to be this social outcast at the EU, and it's really kind of amusing. We had in the United States for the previous 4 years and 8 years prior to that with the Barack Obama administration, we were, fully comfortable with having our supply chains controlled by China. And it's the prime example in the U.S. under Biden was that, what was it, July? It was either June or July of 2021. Biden makes this, or reads this big speech from his teleprompter, committing his administration to a whole of government effort to free supply chains for critical energy minerals and rare earth minerals from Chinese control. We were going to work with our allies, in South America and other parts of the world to obtain our mineral needs, which are not just for green energy. They're also crucial to our energy. Every weapon system has to have those magnets made with rare earth minerals to function. And so, he committed this whole government approach to doing all that and didn't do a damn thing for the next 3.5 years to actually accomplish any of it. And so Trump comes in, he's working and focused on accomplishing it. It's what motivates him to want to acquire Greenland, or at least engage them in a strategic partnership on those rare earth minerals. It's what motivates the talking points about Canada becoming the 51st state. It's what motivates him wanting to retake U.S. control of the Panama Canal. All of that is about controlling those supply chains for rare earth minerals and ensuring the free flow of shipping through the Panama Canal. And that's not popular at the European Commission or with the ministers at the EU. And so, I just think it's just inevitable that Europe is not going to get back into the hard rock mining business. They're just not. They gave that up 40 years ago in the mid 80s, just like the United States did, and said, we're going to turn that all over to China and other countries to mine and to process these kinds of things because it's dirty and we're clean and we're green and we're pretty, in the West. And so we don't want to do any of that dirty stuff. And Trump isn't real worried about being clean and green. He's worried about national security and energy security. And so there's a separation here between the U.S. and the EU and UK that's just inevitable. It's going to happen. The best I think the EU can hope for is to keep NATO together. If they really truly believe Putin's going to try to conquer all of Europe, even though he's having to borrow 100,000 soldiers now from North Korea just to keep trying to hold his ground in Ukraine. So I'm not really sure how he's going to conquer the rest of Europe with that particular military establishment, but we'll see, I guess. It's an inevitable progression. And the United States is, maybe in the future, it may be a more natural ally of Russia than it is of countries like Germany in the UK if the UK is going to continue down this road. I mean, to outright communism. That's what this Labor government is. It's a communist revolution. It's progressing extremely rapidly, which is why they're about bankrupt. As you mentioned, the Treasury Minister crying in Parliament last Friday about it all because she can't manage the budget now. And you know, that's what that speech the vice president made over at the security conference in was it in Brussels?
Munich.
In April, Munich.
Yeah.
In April. That's what that speech was really about. The United States is going to have a hard time remaining a committed ally of a country that discriminates against its native people and arrests them for posting memes on Facebook and sentences them to prison terms. This is not a free democracy as we have known it anymore. And America was well down that same road. So I'm not casting stones here. We were about to go fully down that same path until Elon Musk purchased X. And that changed everything.
Yeah.
So as angry as many of us are at Elon Musk right now for his mounting this idiotic third party, what a clown show that's going to be.
Yeah.
We must remain eternally grateful to him for literally changing the course of history with a single $40 billion investment out of his own pocket. So this has been a hell of a filibuster, hasn't it? Anyway, to summarize, it's my rant for today, everybody. As to summarize, this is inevitable. It's the natural progression, unfortunately, of geopolitical considerations between a country, the United States, that has now had a sea change election and is about to move back down a path towards more traditional energy sources, and a continent in Europe and the UK that remains committed to this WEF program where we're all going to live tiny lives and never be able to travel and have a digital currency that's about to be rolled out there in Europe. And
which is in alignment with China, because China has a digital currency already. And
so exactly. So it's inevitable.
Yeah, there's these similarities between the path of the EU and what China is doing. And so, they're similar partners in some ways. And Stu, what's your take on, is the EU looking for a new sugar daddy? Do you think they could become part of BRICS? Is this just a bunch of rhetoric that they talk about because it's the 50th anniversary, or do you think there's more meat on this?
I think that BRICS is not going to happen. I think that China will not invade Taiwan. They will have a better chance of invading Mongolia. And I didn't see this on my bingo card. And I'm serious because honestly, Russia has lost some leadership with Mongolia, and there are great assets. This is all about right now. The Bank of London is broke, absolutely broke. They have been going around trying to acquire mineral deals around the world. They are trying to their balance sheet, just like the United States has been adding into their balance sheets. We are about to see a complete realignment of trading blocks. We are going to see the United States, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, India becoming a major trading bloc. The EU is going to wither and die. The UK is going to absolutely collapse financially. And this is now going to be a horrific situation when you sit back and think that in China has got some serious financial flaws going on right now. So 400 of their 500 manufacturers that support their car industry just went bankrupt in the last 30 to 60 days because of the tariffs. So you have now 100 manufacturing group in that. So you have the EU needing to re-weaponize, and they've made commitments. And Tammy, you pointed this out, that Canada is saying, oh, we're going to count roads as part of our NATO security. Right. We're going to have creative crayon accounting. Boo hockey. That does not work in Texas. So when you sit back and take a look at how all this is going to see, BRICS is going to fall off on the side. And your question is very valid, Tammy. We have a regime change that's about to happen in China. President Xi is being set aside, and they're putting in the next guy. Is he worse than President Xi? I don't know, but they are getting ready to put a whole new guy in. President Xi had a mild stroke. That doesn't set well. They are not like the United States. And just watch, and I see Tammy typing away going, is Stuart right about this? Yes, Tammy, please double check me. And you're going to see some of this go on right now. So when you take a look at Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the Siberia 2 pipeline has been approved and is now starting to go through. But what is even more critical and has not been on mainstream media is the completion of several railroad lines around the world. Those railroad lines are carry a lot of tanker oil to India from Iran. You have Iraq, you have Syria now looking at some serious pipelines because now we've taken off of that. So I have never seen such a global reshifting of everything, and it's because the Bank of London, the Bank of Paris, and actually the Vatican is in a situation where they're bankrupt. And I've never seen a realignment of people trying to get their balance sheets back online. And President Trump, the one thing that those people don't have, they don't have a President Trump and his team. Now, is President Trump perfect? Heck no. But is he on target? I think he is. And as David said, I cannot wait for a political midterm next year in the United States with a third party when you have a traitor like Mike Pence is now stepping up to be in this political party. And you have, yes.
Well, that's a rumor. That isn't official.
Hey, if you get somebody like Mark Cuban, who is absolutely a bozo waiting to happen, holy smokes.
Clown.
He is a clown. This is going to be a clown show like you wouldn't believe. Even I could not have made this up. So how's that, Tammy? Did I get pretty close?
Yeah. So you made an interesting point there about the rail lines, because one of the big things that China did is they created this massive rail line throughout the EU, and it goes from China down to, I think, there was a port in Germany, and I think they were extending it to a port in France and maybe one in Italy. And talking to people in the European Union in various countries, I know that there is a significant increase in the Chinese population at the different ports and whatever. And it's raised some concern amongst certain people. So here we have this massive rail line. China's extending part of the Belt and Road Initiative throughout all different regions, including the European Union. The European Union says that they want to, friend shore and do all this stuff to separate themselves from critical minerals and processing from China. But then in this discussion last week, the EU was saying to China, we need more certainty on getting these critical minerals from you. So I understand that right now they don't have the capacity to replace what China's provided, but now they want to cut these deals with China regarding the critical minerals. At the same time, they're saying we want to build up our own supply chain. And I know that there's a Brussels-based or Belgian-based chemical company called Solvay, which has increased their critical mineral processing facilities in France. But there's also, one of the reasons why I think Canada has been recruited to have these tighter relationships with the EU, not just to upset America and everything else, but because Canada actually has a lot of these critical minerals. So, Irina, what do you make of all that? And Does it go back to the kind of schizophrenia of the European Union where
Absolutely. What you described is bipolar disorder at the political level. But I'm wondering how they will swing it so, or rather spin it so it doesn't seem bipolar, because they really are big on the talk against China, against Chinese dominance in raw materials. But I wrote a feature story today for Oil Price about Chinese companies snapping up mines around the world. They've been doing it for years. They have been securing their supply chains. And now Western companies, this is so funny, guys. So the FT reported this about the snapping up of mines by Chinese companies, and then it publishes an interview with the chief executive officer or president of Sibanye, the South African miner, who's calling on Western governments to start subsidizing mining companies so they can compete with Chinese miners on a global scale. So basically, let's even the playing field by being like China.
who can
My
compete with
goodness.
that? I mean, really, because China, they subsidize their own production and they wait for companies to make all these investments. And when they start to put their things on the market, China floods the market so that they can't.
Because it
Right.
subsidized it all, and because it has been
Right.
thinking long term and
Yeah.
strategically, of
Yeah.
which apparently our brave leaders in Brussels and across national capitals are currently incapable. I mean, they are 20 years late to this party of building supply chains for critical materials.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what they're doing with China right now. I think is partly desperation and partly acknowledging the reality of how things are. But instead of, once again stopping and perhaps reprioritizing that whole transition business and first thinking about energy independence and stuff like that, perhaps even energy affordability, they're not doing this.
No.
They're trying to compete with China by trying to be more like China and trying to play more with China, which is just,
It's not possible.
Not
Yeah.
possible.
it's not, but they will try to do it. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, at the same time, they're complaining about Chinese emissions and a lot of the solar panels and wind turbine components that come from China are made with coal power, which the EU is upset about because it has these high emissions and wants, China to take more action on that. So once again, it puts the sort of EU energy security, even if they're going to go forward with the transition, into some difficulty if they want to insist that China take more action on emissions, because I'm thinking China will increase the price and say, oh, okay, you want us to lower emissions, you want to buy our solar panels?
It costs money to lower emissions, which nobody knows better than the EU.
Yeah, exactly. After all.
Yes.
I just refuse to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
It's
David, what do you think of what Irina commented on there?
Well, I mean, I think she's absolutely right. This is all just, I try not to be cynical. I really do. I don't like being a cynical person. But I don't know that there's any way for any of this to be avoided, really, in the EU or in the UK. I was watching I saw a great documentary yesterday, a 4-part Netflix documentary about the 7/7 attacks in 2005 on the subways and in London and
the buses.
Again and the buses and the subway and the tube in London, and then the follow-up attacks on the 21st that failed because they didn't mix the explosives right. But I found myself absolutely nostalgic for the leadership qualities of Tony Blair. Who I detested at the time.
That's how bad it has become.
Well, yes, I understand, but when you compare him to the leadership in not just the UK, but all across Europe now, it's night and day, and just in terms of real leadership qualities and the ability to make decisions that actually make sense. And I just it's so sad to me to watch, especially what's happening in the UK, because I do believe this government is a communist government, and it's just all falling apart now, and that's not good for anybody. It's like, I don't want anyone to think I'm celebrating any of this stuff that's happening, because the United States and all these European countries that have had such a positive, mainly positive relationship for over a century now, and alliance, and that has done a lot of good in the world in addition to a lot of bad. And so now we're kind of embarked on this brave new world in which these alliances are in the process of realigning. And the one thing we can know and easily predict is that none of it is going to be predictable, and we don't really know what the negative or positive impacts of these alliance ships is going to have on all of us and our families. And I'm afraid we lost Stu.
Yeah, maybe
He's
he
badly
doesn't
must
run
have died.
out.
He was battling to keep his Starlink online, and now I'm going to have to figure out how to load our slides. So you ladies take it away while I try to figure out how to reload those
Okay.
slides here.
Well, with respect to what you said about Tony Blair, what's interesting is that he's still there behind the scenes, putting forward policy ideas and doing all these things, trying to
Yeah.
explain to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party how to do these different things. And in particular, the Blair Institute, and he partnered with, I think, I forget what his name is a former conservative guy. I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. Hague or something.
William Hague.
Yeah, William Hague. Yeah. So last year, I think it was, they produced a report together about how Britain absolutely needs a digital ID in order to address all the illegal immigrants coming in, because somehow illegal immigrants are going to comply with the digital ID.
Yeah.
And then tied to that would be a central bank digital currency, and they need to get a grip on AI so that it can be used for the benefit of government and the people. And whenever they word things like that, it always causes my little spidey senses to perk up and say, well, maybe that's not such a good idea. So if we to sum up what we've talked about so far with respect to the EU and China, is there this new alliance coming about? Stu says we're in the middle of a churn where things are changing. David agrees. We're not really sure what form this is going to take going forward. I found it interesting that China and the EU were talking about how they both believe in a rules-based order, but everybody agrees that China kind of manipulates the rules-based order for its
And
benefit,
and the EU does it
and the
too.
EU, exactly.
US
All the
does it
countries. All countries try to weaponize that
this
or manipulate it.
rules-based order is of the sort, rules for thee, but not for me.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to work in the long term. But may I just note that William Hague notoriously said a few years ago at some op-ed somewhere that Britain will have to go to war with other countries to make sure they are cutting their emissions.
Yeah. Okay.
Holy cow.
That's the kind of brain we're dealing with.
That's insane.
But that's what that new guy,
emission cutting efforts in other countries.
But that's what that new Climate Institute at the Council of Foreign Relations said. They came out and said that that America needs to prepare that war might be needed in order to lower emissions.
War is very energy intensive and emission intensive, but these are different. I'm sure these are different emissions.
I'm sure it means something else.
Better emissions. Yeah.
That's just nuts, guys. I don't have these slides, unfortunately.
Okay.
I thought Stu had sent them to me. He didn't. So we're kind of on our own, just in terms of
Okay.
doing our.
Well, I only remember one of my stories what it was about, and
Stories of the week.
it was in tune with the topic. The Bruegel published this paper suggesting you'll never guess what they suggested. They suggested that Europe outsources certain things like ammonia to countries with lower energy costs, because it doesn't have to produce all these things. They mentioned ammonia specifically as one of these things that Europe could outsource, because that's completely novel idea and not at all at odds with Europe's plans to produce more of what it needs at home in order to reduce its dependence on who? On China.
Of course.
Yeah.
Let's see here, Irina. I think I've got your email. The other ones that you wanted.
The
I don't remember
Financial
the
Times one, which is
What was
Berlin
it?
explores 4 billion subsidy for German heavy industry.
Yeah.
How sweet.
Well, the headline says it all, really, doesn't it?
It really
Yeah,
does.
but so what are they subsidizing in order to make up for the high electricity costs and the lack of
Yes.
natural gas?
Yes, I'll be quoting directly because I can't paraphrase. It's too delicious. The measure is part of efforts to reduce electricity costs for industrial groups, to revitalize the Eurozone's largest economy after its longest post-war period of stagnation.
Yeah.
I mean,
those
Germany's heavy industry has been crying for help for a very long time. Well, relatively, 2 years. And they've said, basically, you're on your own. We'll just tax you more for your carbon emissions. Now, after how many quarters of negative growth or around zero changes in GDP growth, now they're realizing they will have to start spending billions on the heavy industries as well, because they cannot survive on their own.
Because they're moving to China. Anything at that heavy industry that requires a lot of energy inputs, like the chemical companies have been shifting to China. So
yeah, but they'll be losing jobs. And by the way, bankruptcies in Germany are at the highest in 10 years, but I'm sure it's all right. And more subsidies will fix it.
I'm sure it is.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I'm interested to know what you think, Irina, about the EU's methane regulations, where they're creating a massive database to where companies that are exporting to the EU oil, natural gas, or coal, they have to provide what their methane emissions are if there's leaks and all this kind of thing. So they're going to require all this monitoring. They have to provide a report. Then the EU is going to create this massive database so that importing companies can prioritize from where they receive their oil, natural gas, and coal. What do you think? I know that's a bit of a digression, but what do you think about that?
I think energy is going to get even more expensive in Europe, because this monitoring costs money, and exposures to Europe will probably add more to these costs, because it will be a hassle. Didn't we just lose, when I say we, I mean humankind, did we just lose a methane tracking satellite?
Yeah.
What are we going to do now? How are these companies going to monitor their emissions? This is just more of the same. Energy will get even more expensive in Europe, and the German government and every other government in Europe will have to start subsidizing fuel again.
Right. That's why I mentioned it, because I thought they might end up having to do the subsidization.
Absolutely.
Route.
They will end up having to do this. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, David, do you think, just to kind of stick with this for just a second, do you think America will comply with those rules? Do you think Qatar will comply?
Well, they're going to have to some extent, right? otherwise they're going to be facing penalties and potential, inability to do business in some countries. And so I know the United States, I know Trump has, in his tariff negotiations with the EU and UK has made those regulations a topic of priority in those negotiations. But how strongly he's going to stand up for that, I'm not sure. Cutter, I don't know, what their real leverage is geopolitically, other than they have a lot of gas.
Well,
And
they
so
said they wouldn't do it. They already
right,
said that they're not doing the
yeah,
methane monitoring thing. So
right. And so
they have
that's the
markets.
thing is
They're just not going to sell to Europe. Good luck.
right. And so the question then becomes, right, is Europe going to be willing to cut off its nose to defend those regulations? And who knows? I mean, this is a religious exercise, right? And so there is a religious zealotry behind all of this. And so these are not, always talk about China being a rational actor as a government. The government acts rationally to protect its country's interests and its energy and national security. The EU and the Biden administration that we had in office for the past 4 years were not rational actors. And so there is a religious zealotry driving so much of this that you really don't know. It's almost impossible to predict how far they're going to be willing to go to defend this kind of thing. And because, I mean, if you really do believe that the world's going to burn up and we're all going to die by, in just 25 years, if Ed Miliband doesn't get his way, with all the insanity he wants, then you're gonna defend this stuff with your life. And the guy that's talking about we're gonna need to go to war to cut emissions, he's serious. That he's not joking. That's not. I mean, we laugh at him, but those are the people who are in power now in Europe. And so countries like the Trump administration in the United States that are not willing to go along with that stuff, are gonna say, well, okay, you want to enforce that, then find your LNG from somewhere else. Go back to taking your gas from Russia and Putin. But wait, you're afraid of Russia and Putin too. So who aren't you afraid of, right? Yeah. It's a really awful situation geopolitically now.
Yeah. Okay, so go into your stories. Do you remember what stories you put forward, David?
Oh, I do. I actually have those. I know my stuff, right? I just don't have the slides for everybody else. The first story was a piece at Reuters saying OPEC Plus speeds up oil output hikes, adds 538,000 barrels a day of additional production in August, right? And so nominally, that's true, right? OPEC did agree to say, well, we're going to put another 548,000 barrels a day back onto the market. But, they, in the last however many months it's been, I've kind of lost count, they were claiming they were putting 411,000 back on the market. Yeah. And in reality, I think they've averaged about 130,000 additional barrels on the market during that time. So, we read those things and you think, oh my gosh, 500,000 barrels a day, the price is going to collapse. What did the price do this morning? It opened up, right? It went higher, not radically higher, but 50 cents a barrel higher, because nobody believes those numbers, first of all. And apparently, the global economy is doing significantly better in China and most other parts of the world than the IEA and these other experts have predicted it would. And so demand's higher. We're seeing inventories all over the world dropping as a result, because the market is not nearly as oversupplied as people continue to talk about. It's just not, obviously.
No, they keep harping on about it. Oversupply.
I know. They do. Yeah. Yes. I mean, and supposedly we've got a 2 million barrel a day oversupplied market, and yet inventories everywhere are falling and the price goes up. So who knows what's reality anymore? We can't even trust I mean, it's unfortunately, it's really sad, but we go back to the climate zealotry. It's even impacted, things like the IEA, which we used to be able to rely upon for accurate information. Now, intentionally putting out inaccurate information to support a narrative of climate alarm.
Yeah.
And so that has big impacts to everybody, folks. It really does. And unfortunately, we need to figure out a way to correct that. Second one was, and Stu just said his laptop died. The OBBA, well, this was one I wrote, so I can't attribute it to anyone else. And so nobody else probably shares this opinion. But my opinion about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is that it basically reset the energy policy playing field back to 2019 in the United States. Before the COVID pandemic and all the climate madness took hold here in the United States, we've rolled back, and I know Alex Epstein and others are furious at Congress for not just outright repealing the subsidies for wind and solar and electric vehicles. They're phasing them out instead. But when you look at how that all works, and I have nothing but respect for Alex and the others. When you look at how that provision really works, those projects have to be under construction a year from last Friday, so July 4th, 2026. If the project's not under construction, then it's going to see steadily diminishing ability over the following 3 years to access even parts of those subsidies. And that's going to mean, these are companies that all have to borrow essentially all of their capital because none of them has a workable, sustainable business plan in place without the subsidies. So what's capital going to do? What are private investment firms going to do? What's BlackRock going to do? What are the banks going to do? Well, they're going to take a look and see that, well, gee, our rates of return are going to diminish on a stair-step manager over the following 3 years and then be less than zero after that. And these are all long-term projects, that claim they're going to be in a business for 25 years or more. And so the capital flight that's going to take place out of the wind and solar businesses is going to be astonishing after next July 4th. It's going to be a flood. And where's it going to go? It's going to go into the fossil fuel industries because, their side of all this is we haven't invested nearly enough in new reserve finding in oil and gas. And we've intentionally tried to kill our coal industry in the Western world over the past 15 years. And so we need hundreds of billions of additional dollars of investment going into those industries just to keep the damn lights on now, because you're not going to see a big flood of solar after next year. So I think even though Congress did blink and the White House did blink, the net effect of what they've done is they're going to kill those industries. And then same thing on the EV industry. Can even Tesla compete against internal combustion cars in the United States without that $7,500 federal subsidy per unit? I don't believe they can. That goes away at the end of September. It's going to be a bloodbath in America's EV industry after that. And so whether they intended to or not, I think Congress, the business realities of how capital acquisition in the business world really works is going to dictate that all of those industries are going to be struggling just to hang on very quickly.
Well, those are very interesting points.
It will kill more than these industries. It will kill a central theme of the transition narrative that says that wind and solar are cheaper than everything and profitable, even without the subsidies. This is going to die so loudly.
Yes, it will prove the lie. That's always been a lie, that narrative. And it's going to become reality very quickly. Everyone's going to realize.
Be brutal.
Yes, it's going to be brutal.
I guess it depends on how they define construction. So you say they have to begin
it's the most liberal
right?
definition possible. You just gotta begin acquiring the materials and turn a little dirt, and you're under construction.
Yeah.
But how many are they really going to be able to start in the next year that will allow them to even qualify for parts of those subsidies?
Right.
You know,
Will they risk it
Interesting.
also?
Will they risk it? Yeah, that's a good point.
right.
Speaking of BlackRock, I just want to throw in here that they withdrew their Ukraine fund.
Yeah.
So BlackRock was going to, be part of the central component of the reconstruction of Ukraine, and they were trying to get all these investors in there to do so, and they just withdrew that fund. I guess they couldn't get enough
Wow.
uptick.
Yeah, well, that's because Russia is losing so badly. It's advancing, and it just gained control over the largest lithium deposit in eastern Ukraine. So that's why.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, apparently, BlackRock couldn't find any takers for this massive reconstruction fund because they're not sure it's even going to be Ukraine in a couple of years.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So my stories today, the first one was in a publication called Offshore Technology, and I love this one. I was thinking of Irina when I read it because I'm like, oh, this is so cute for Germany. Germany approves North Sea gas drilling. So Germany has approved North Sea gas drilling, and when I read this story, I just laughed because the company is trying to be so virtuous and saying, we're ready to pull the plug once demand is met. I'm like, when we don't need it anymore, we'll stop producing. Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm just like, really? Isn't that normally how it works?
Oh, God.
Yeah, so the drilling is to be conducted by a company I've never heard of called One Dias, which I guess, is it a Norwegian company? No, maybe I'm thinking of a different story, but I just thought it was really funny, and they have to make a final business decision on whether or not they go forward. They're partnering with the Netherlands, even though the Netherlands had banned offshore natural gas production because of earthquakes or something. So it's interesting that now the Netherlands will partner with Germany in order to develop offshore natural gas. So energy reality bites Germany.
Really. Oh, and don't forget the part about sourcing the energy for the drilling operation from wind turbines.
Wind. Yeah.
Right.
And in the marine protected area.
That's right. The marine protected area, and they're going to use wind.
Delicious.
And when do they think demand is going to run out? I mean,
I know.
That's what kills me about it all.
Like, but we're ready to pull the plug, they said.
Sure they are, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so environmental action in Germany is really angry, and they warned that it will have a catastrophic effect on biodiversity in the North Sea.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how many other rigs are out there in the North Sea? And I think Equinor also makes this case that, they're sustainable because their offshore platforms also use renewable energy or something. I don't know. But yeah, so that's Germany with energy reality biting them in the butt. And then my next article is from the Telegraph UK. And the headline was Miliband to cover Britain's lakes in floating solar panels.
Oh my God.
So they plan to
This man hates Mother Nature, doesn't he? He just
does.
Mother Nature. Anyway, sorry.
And I'm like, the UK doesn't have a whole lot of lakes. And the ones that they do, they're often used for recreation and whatnot. So I'm trying to imagine, like, would they consider doing this on Lake Windermere, which is like this massive kind of tourist draw near the Peak District in the Lake District?
About the Lake District, is it going to be the floating solar district soon?
I know. That's what I was thinking. And are boats going to dodge the solar panels? I mean, are they going to cover the whole thing? What does that do to the life within the lake? It just
very good question.
Anyway, he wants to quadruple the use of solar in the UK, which has the second worst. It's the second worst place in the world for solar power. Number one is Ireland. and it's like, it's a terrible situation in the UK for solar because it's often gray, it's often overcast, and kind of makes no sense. But yet they're going to quadruple it, and they've published a new solar roadmap.
Oh my goodness.
So,
a solar roadmap. So
Yeah.
Minnesota, the state of Minnesota here in the United States, which is where our former vice presidential candidate Tim Walz is governor, is called the land of 1,000 lakes. So
Yeah.
now we're giving Tim Walz a terrible idea to turn his state into the land of 1,000 big ass solar arrays. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
The floating solar
floating
arrays.
solar arrays.
And there are pretty long winters in Minnesota, I believe.
Yes, they all freeze over in
They would
winter.
freeze over. I don't think they could do that.
That would be
but
That
great
won't stop them.
for
That
that.
won't stop them.
but I can up that one. So in Canada, in the Arctic territory of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, the government has announced subsidies to put solar panels in the Arctic to help with the power supply of the Inuit up in the Arctic. I'm like, so half the year you get no sun. How does that work? So for half the year you'll have, I guess the solar panels will provide some electricity, but what do you do for the other half of the year? So
batteries, Tammy, giant,
that's
huge,
right.
massive batteries. They have the space.
Yes.
Sure.
The technology is just around the corner for batteries with a 6-month discharge life, right?
Totally.
Yes.
Just around the corner.
In minus 40, for sure. For sure. Like,
And then you got to
I don't know.
account, though, the other problem is you got to account for all those days when it's cloudy, right? So it's really not even half the year.
No.
Because it's cloudy a lot
Yeah.
of the time up there. So
Yeah,
it's also
Yeah.
insane.
it is insane. But I'm waiting for the energy realities to hit Canada. I don't think we're there yet. And, Germany's starting to, I don't know, be hit by it. But whether or not anything comes of their North Sea natural gas development, I don't know. I think it probably still has to run the gauntlet of various approvals and whatnot. So they may make this announcement, but who knows when it will actually happen. And that's,
But
as we all know,
considering it.
Yeah, they're considering it. So
That's
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Oh.
So
Guys, I'm
think
sorry I was not able to load up those slides anyway.
that's okay. We
we
got
did
to talk
fine.
about it anyway, so
Yeah.
Yeah, we did fine.
it's all good. I think that's it for today, and I'm really sorry that we lost Stu to a dead battery. So, if you think about exactly. Even a laptop battery can't seem to last more than a couple hours.
I tell
so-
you.
And
But the
it's not
new
even cool.
new generation of batteries is just around the corner, as it always
yeah.
has been for the last
Yes.
50 years.
Yes. Well, apparently Japan has developed a new kind of solar panel that they've been researching and developing for many years now. I think the Department of Energy had also given some money towards it, and they're just at the point of commercialization. And how often have we heard that? Just
Every week. Literally
there.
every
Boy.
week. Yeah.
Almost there.
almost there. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. We're going to end early, a minute early or so. So
Minute
thank you.
early. Wow.
Thank you to everybody who are probably on holiday but have still
Yeah.
tuned in. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Robert, for being here.
And thank you, Robert.
Thanks,
You're a
guys.
trooper.
This was fun.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a wonderful
See you
week.
next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.